I am involved in a class project concerning the restoration and preservation of grave sites at Patton Cemetery. My good friend Karen has resided directly across from Patton Cemetery for 18 years. We're going to take a walking tour through parts of Patton Cemetery, and Karen has her own family connections with Patton Cemetery that she will share with us.
This area that surrounds me right now is one of the oldest areas in the cemetery, and so we're looking at some very old headstones here. This one is somebody named Christian. We can see it's pretty well preserved for as old as it is. However, as we proceed in our walk, we'll find lots that are not so well preserved. But this is of interest to me, and I think all of you, in that it says Mary Walker. And I do know from the history that the cemetery was originally named Walker Cemetery, and as my friend interviews the historian in town, she can confirm that, but I'm guessing that this is a headstone from one of the original, people behind the building of the cemetery, so to speak. This area that we're walking over to now is actually the Catholic section. It's Sacred Heart specifically, and as you can see, most of these headstones are very well taken care of, and the family members are coming out and they're putting lovely decorations for their loved ones that are gone. And I'm not quite sure why this area is so well taken care of as compared to some of the other areas, but maybe in large part because it's a bit newer than some of the areas, so that therefore they're living people who can come to visit these grave sites. We're continuing on from what I know to be the Catholic Sacred Heart section. This over in this area is just what we would call, I guess, a general cemetery. So probably the largest area with probably the most headstones. A lot of trees. And as we carry on, we'll see that some of those trees have unfortunately come down in storms and have knocked over some of the headstones. They're not always getting picked up or put back together the way they should be. And so not certain if that's a lack of family members funding or the cemetery's lack of funds. But the history needs to be preserved for posterity.
Karen, you had told me that your family has a certain love of this cemetery for special reasons.
Well, years ago, I'm 55 now, and the first time I set foot in the cemetery was when I was, I think, about 13 years old, when my great aunt died, and she is buried here, as is my great uncle, who died about a year later. And my grandmother, who lived on the other side of town, used to always talk about bringing a big bouquet of her lovely pink peonies over here for Memorial Day. But it was hard. She was already getting old, and the one year that I had come over, it began to rain and the caretaker never met me, so we didn't get out that day. But you can see a fallen headstone just over this way, and it's not that old. But I guess we all know that they're terribly expensive. So maybe when a headstone comes down, unless the family is living and has a lot of money, they just sadly don't get replaced. But this one, since we don't see any fallen trees nearby, one must wonder if it was a vandalism.
Because the base doesn't seem to be sinking. It doesn't seem to have other damage. Well, Karen, it was interesting to me that you told me that back when your great aunt was buried, they didn't always put headstones like they do today.
I think maybe just when people didn't have as much money, maybe they didn't. And
So you're not sure exactly where she's...
No, sadly, don't know. I know the general area, which is actually under the main, as we come in with the tree line area. I believe it's just in that general area there. My cousin had talked about marking the grave years ago, but now doesn't feel the same way. Feels they've gone on and there's just no reason. He doesn't live in town.
Sure. Which is, I think, why so many communities have had to take over the upkeep and preservation of these sites.
Yes, and then especially when they get so old that people, there just aren't loved ones to come out and tend to the grave sites any longer.
Look at some of these fine old large monuments that they used to put up. You certainly don't see those being installed today.
And they'll be for a whole family. You know, that there are a couple areas, like if you look here to your left, there's that tall, very
like
tall, and around it there are actually the family's headstones in a circular fashion around it.
Well, sadly, in years past, when whole family, you know, often children or whole families would be wiped out in the influenza or different epidemics like that.
My own personal history with cemeteries, not Patton, but as a young child, when my family did a lot of traveling, when we traveled by car, my parents always loved history, so we would, when we'd happen upon an old cemetery, we'd always get out and take a walk and read the headstones. They're often, as one can imagine, quite moving, but historically quite interesting too. And it would just be a kind of a neat outing. I think when I was young, I probably was a bit bored, maybe a little scared the way kids get, but now I really understand why my parents appreciated that, because it's so rich in history.
Look, here's another quite large monument.
Oh, what a shame, yes.